In the realm of the Endless Possibilities podcast, we delve into the profound depths of consciousness and self-realization with our esteemed guest, Harry Alto, a luminary in the literary and artistic world. Early encounters with a protective sphere of light marked the starting point of his transcendental journey. Through meditation, he peeled back the layers of consciousness, revealing a world within. Harry speaks of stages in consciousness, including the unity consciousness, a state where the self dissolves into the cosmic fabric, experiencing oneness with the universe. This sphere of enlightenment offers profound insights into the nature of self and consciousness. As our host Garrett navigates this cosmic conversation, he finds himself gaining a deeper understanding of his own experiences. Together, they explore the labyrinth of consciousness, shedding light on the transformative journey towards self-realization. Each moment, each revelation, a step closer to understanding the universe within us. Join Gareth and Harry on the latest episode of the Endless Possibilities podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Endless Possibilities podcast. My name is Garrett and today I have a very special guest on the show. His name is Harry Alto. I'm going to give Harry a quick introduction here. Harri Aalto is a distinguished author and thinker whose journey through life has been marked by profound and transformative experiences. Born in Finland and moving to Canada at the age of 5, Harry's early years were characterized by a unique and vivid perception of consciousness. He recalls an experience of an unmoving sphere of light and consciousness surrounding his body, providing a sense of safety and effortless flow. As he grew older, these experiences expanded, bringing intense energy, overwhelming happiness, and extraordinary physical abilities. By the time he reached high school, Harry's nights and days began to blend into a seamless continuum of consciousness, leading to deeper explorations of his inner world. His introduction to Transcendental meditation, TM, as a young adult catalyzed a significant leap in his personal experience, allowing him to intuit, hear, and to see subtle fabrics of the quietest levels of his own consciousness. Harry's journey didn't stop there. Over the years, he has expressed his insights through various forms of art, including watercolor and oil paintings, as well as sculpture. About 30 years ago, he began to perceive the hum of existence as layers of knowledge and to see the divine heavens, experiencing the interconnectedness of all things. Through his books, Landscape of Enlightenment and Universal Consciousness is Profoundly Personal, Harry shares his profound understanding that daily life, far from being a field of turbulent change, is the greatest expression of its divine self-awareness. Harri Aalto's insights are a testament to the extraordinary potential within each of us to experience and understand the deeper layers of consciousness and existence. Harry, thanks for being on the show. Welcome.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's terrific. I don't know what to say after all that. I'd like to meet that guy.
Let's try and get him. Let's see if we can meet Harry. And yeah, I suppose to get the ball rolling, Harry, could you tell me a little bit about that sphere that was turning up and encapsulating you as a kid?
I was very young, a young kid. I didn't consider that sphere or that light as anything special. It was just there. I, like anybody who has a natural experience, you just think everybody has it, right? Why not?
Yeah.
It wasn't uncomfortable. It was nice. I liked it. It was kind of like a little bit like as a kid, the way I thought about it was like a little bit of an armor or something. So if I put my hand, it wasn't big when I was tiny. I put my hand outside that bubble. I'd want to pull it back in there like there's fire out there or something. It sounds a bit odd, but it was a normal experience. It traveled with me. It was me. Looking back on it, it was just consciousness. My consciousness happened to have a light quality to it. And since I was a kid, I wasn't very big yet because I was very little too. But I could say about that sphere is that it's never gone away. it's expanded. It's gone bigger and bigger and bigger. If I try to find a sphere now, I have to go to quite a distance to find it. I wouldn't call it an aura because I guess it was an aura, but it's everywhere. So, and it had a quality to it that I could tap into. I could look at it and say, well, what is this? I remember doing this as a kid, and I'd get some kind of wave of energy or bliss even, and I'd have to leave the house, and mother would say, where are you going, Harry? I said, well, I got to go jog or something. So I go outside and run around the block for a while, and then that bliss or whatever you want to call it settled down. So there was this quality more than just light to it. And I would describe consciousness like that. Everybody has consciousness, right? And one way to look at it is we're here on Earth. We got all the faculties. We got a heart, a mind, two eyes, two ears. We all look somewhat similar. We've been designed, if you want to use that word, to have pure consciousness. Everybody has consciousness. Some people are aware of it. Some people aren't aware of it. If you're permanently aware of it, historically, it's called enlightenment. It's not a big deal because in the same way that, say you want to be a musician or something, you have more or less the people who get into it have a talent for it. So they go to school, they learn, and it takes a few years or whatever, but they have a talent for it. Every human being has a talent for self-realization. Everyone. It doesn't matter. Everybody has a talent. But you gotta, develop it, think about it, figure it out, and experience it. Either meditate, some spiritual practice, but that's not good enough. You also have to understand it as part of the growth process. I've learned with all the people that I've talked to is that lots of people come to groups and they have this inner silence. They have some inner stillness. And until you tell them that's something that's significant, you're experiencing it, they devalue it. It's there. Okay, big deal. Don't you find that, Gareth, that there's a lot of people, they have that?
Sure. But what I guess I find is an awful lot of people, suffering kind of brings them to want to find their true nature, and
Yes.
they turn up, and a lot of people are going through a hard time. I would say what it is that their souls have probably gone into what's known as dejection, and they just can't find lasting happiness in the outside world, right? So they
That's right.
exhaust all of the avenues, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, it has to be in spirituality. So a lot of the times the people I meet, they arrive here through suffering, right? But listening to your story, Harry, you seemed to come in with a certain level of awareness, right? You, by the sounds of it, you had this from the moment you were born.
Yes, but I'd like to point out that suffering is something you gain. Most kids aren't
Okay.
suffering. If they're in any kind of a reasonable house, you got a
Yeah.
father and a mother, you're looked after, you're running around like a chicken, having a good time. You're going to school, do this, do that. People lose it. They almost
Yeah.
grab that suffering from the environment because it starts to overpower that innocence and that simplicity that you
Yeah.
probably had as a kid. And you made a good point. If I think of myself as a kid and I think of myself as now, and I think my wife would agree, I still act like a kid sometimes. And that kind of openness is there in children. There's no tomorrow for a kid. They're just living the moment, aren't they? Most kids are.
Yeah.
And I tend to be that way now, but I'm a little more mature than I was when I was 5. And I talk a lot more, as my wife would tell you. But I think we lose that innocence as we get into adolescence, stuff kicks in, and rather than having that innocence or that simplicity that's permanent, something temporary kicks in. Like, oh, I got to have this or I got to have that. Okay, that guy's got a nice car. I got to have a nice car too. Big house. There's nothing wrong with that. There's only something wrong with it if that's your life and there's nothing else. And there's something bigger for all that ups and downs of life to be part of. The way that I look at stress is it's like you're driving a car and your windscreen gets a little dirty. Now you turn the wiper on. So we get pointed in the spiritual direction when we don't like all that dirt on the windscreen. would be the
Mm.
stress and the ups and downs you're talking
Yeah.
about, the overpowering influence of change. I've never advocated that we want to get rid of that change. I always advocated, and certainly my life has proved, that the material world essentially isn't much different fundamentally than the inner world. They're connected on a universal, simple, realized level. They're aspects of the same consciousness. And when you begin to realize that, there's a number of stages for
Mm.
that. When you begin to realize that, we call it realization. When you don't realize that, you want more and you get old. Doesn't matter how rich you get. It seems to be that
Yeah.
constant change is not very good, if that's
Yeah.
all it
It's
is.
yeah.
Right, Garrett?
Yeah. So, I mean, what you just touched on there, Harry, the outside and the inside being the same, right? My first realization was me stood in the gym pondering the nature of reality of being experienced internally. And when I made that statement to myself, there was a crack or a tear inside my mind, and I had a massive awakening, right? And from that day on, I changed. So I realized that consciousness is not, I'm not seeing the world outside. It's not a physical reality that's outside of me. It's existing within my consciousness. And consciousness is fundamental, right?
I would take it a step farther. It's not that it's inside you or outside you. You're
Yeah.
both. Right. Don't
Yes.
you agree with
Yeah.
that? It's you begin to realize, say you meditate, close your eyes, and you're having a nice experience, and you do it for a year or two or whatever. And at some point, when you open your eyes after your practice, whatever practice you're doing, you begin to realize that same feeling, that same expansion, that same connectedness. Wait a minute, it's there. And then you close your eyes the next day. And over time, that connectedness with your environment, your inside and outside experiences, have become familiar to you, intimate to you. So the outside becomes familiar, and you realize that there's no such thing as inside and outside. What there is the experience of the self, consciousness itself appears. And even though nothing changes, the door's going to have to look like the door. It's going to go through if the door is closed, you got to open it.
Yeah.
But something happens, like you said. And when that becomes permanent, it can be, some people kind of ooze into it bit by bit, drip by drip. Other people, like yourself, have a more dramatic experience. Whoa, some of my closest friends over the years, they used to come and we talk and this and that. And you know what I noticed? So when one or two or three of these people woke up, close friends of mine, they changed. And they'd come to me one day and say, "What happened to you?" I would be more surprised than them sometimes. I said, "What happened to you? You've changed. You don't talk the same way." Well, I kind of lost a friend and gained an equal or something, somebody we could talk to on a knowledge level, understanding level, and all that stuff that they used to say, "Well, I don't know what you're saying, Harry. It doesn't make sense, does it?" Well, it doesn't make sense unless you have the experience. And then when you have the experience, it makes sense. So
Mhm.
there's a kind of, for me, I guess you could say I've always been inquisitive, because whenever I get any kind of experience, I'm like a dog. I gnaw it to death. I want to know what it is. I want to,
Yeah.
what is this new thing that I'm experiencing? Don't you find that?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's a funny one. And I totally agree with you when people start to wake up, they totally change, right? And how you relate to one another changes. I've definitely noticed that. So, Harry, I wonder,
I've frozen. Have you noticed?
yeah, okay.
I don't think it's emphasized very much, but I think you really get it, that the fact that the realized state is you can call it twofold. One is the experience and one is the understanding. I
Mm.
found that absolutely vital,
Yeah.
because particularly seekers who have been doing TM or some spiritual practice for years and years, they already have an experience. almost everyone, they have some kind of silence, they have some kind of stillness or expansion or whatever they call, or they have flashy experiences, which they say go away, and I'm waiting for that flash or whatever. If they don't understand it, then it's not, the experience of the self isn't robust enough to kind of live in daily life. You
Yeah.
have doubt, you have this or that, right? Do you find that
Yeah,
with people?
totally agree, Harry. So when I had my awakening, I didn't know anything about enlightenment or spiritual awakening. And I just had this lightning bolt hit me. And I knew what had happened, right? It was as if God woke up and started looking out through my eyes. But I had no framework, right? I had absolutely nothing. I just had this experience. I was now different. All my fear had disappeared. So I was like, right, I need to find somebody who knows what happened, right? And the first person I came across was a teacher called Adi Ashanti, and he had some beautiful books and audio books, and I started listening to him. And he had a framework. There was stages, and I was like, okay, I understand where I am. This by what he's describing, I'd say I'm here. And by me having an understanding, it helped me to then refine my perceptions of it, right? I was getting to know them qualities more and more. As I drive to work, I'd be listening to him describing the states, and then I'd be like looking out the window and I'd be able to see almost like the layers of consciousness unfolding daily, changing daily. My sense of what that was deepening every day through having an intellectual understanding. But I do just want to add really quick, Harry, I think it's better to have the awakening first and then have the understanding, because I find a lot of people who try and study it first, they get caught up in the mind. And
No, that's
what do
completely
you
right.
think?
Oh, I
Yeah,
have, there's this one guy on the group. He's brilliant. He's got an enormously high IQ. It makes my IQ look like a child's IQ. He's one of those, he belongs to that society of high IQ people, over 150 or something. Okay.
yeah,
And he knows everything intellectually.
yeah,
And this is funny about this guy because he has fantastic experiences, but he insists that they come and they go and they come and they go. And he analyzes it and he puts this and he says, well, this experience I had and the locus of experience was there. But I don't have the blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. And I said, isn't there something simple in your experience? He said, well, yes, but I have to think about what does simplicity mean? What does simple mean? What is it? How can I describe? And he goes on and on like that. And I've been doing this with him for about a year. And he finally, just a couple of days ago, he said, Harry, I think my intellect is getting in the way.
yeah,
And I've told him that about 6,000 times. And he
yeah.
finally said it. And he says, yes, I do have something connects these high experiences. And I'm attempting not to anticipate what self-realization is. So I'm
Yeah.
very happy with that because it was getting kind of repetitive.
Okay, so I have a quick question on that, Harry. So a certain level of understanding is needed, right, to really solidify the awakening or the shift in consciousness, right? You can have the shift, but for it to be fully internalized, the intellect somehow has to understand the mechanics of what's going on, right? But I've also noticed, and you've just mentioned this guy, right, that when the intellect brings our attention in, it brings into a really narrow pinpoint, like a focal point to be able to figure things out. And that to me almost feels like the opposite of what awakening is, right? Awakening is an unboundedness and a unity, whereas the intellect brings us down into these very small pinpoints. So I get what's happening with these people when they're trying to understand it. So do you think that they should maybe have the experience first before trying to like figure it all out?
Everybody's so different, right? Okay.
Yeah,
If you're not awake, the intellect is just like any other experience. It overshadows everything else you're thinking about, talking about. Once you're in a unified state, that is to say, you recognize that the self is universal and at least on a feeling level, even your environment is part of the self. What I came to, I don't consider myself particularly smart, but because I've had this experience my whole life, I figured it out, for me at least. And what happened to me years and years ago, I would say that my thinking mind, my analytical mind, my intellect didn't come out of the feeling. It was part of it. I could even say, if you use this term, layers of consciousness, you could say the intellect ultimately is one of those layers of consciousness. They're not different from each other. They're almost like they're looking at each other. And for instance, you're awake and you look at your consciousness and your mouth starts working like mine does, right? And your intellect works, but it works to describe the experience you're having from within the experience. Okay, that's kind of a mature kind of a realization, because you can now talk about it fully. But anybody who wakes up and they've been there for a while, they begin to realize that I can, if they have any kind of intellect, they can start describing the experience, but it doesn't separate them anymore. Now, your point is, if somebody isn't awake, should they be analyzing this? Not so much, but they should still listen to people like you who actually have the experience and say, do I have that? And let their intellect figure that out. Well, I have that feeling, it's there. And you can think about it a little bit, but most people aren't intellectual. Okay. Are they? Not, at least most people don't think too much.
No, yeah, most people don't. I find the people that I come across who get themselves into trouble are usually men, intellectual types, engineers, architects, those kind of, they want to understand, figure everything out. So usually that's the culprit. Yeah.
Usually the experience takes care of the situation. When somebody begins to wake up, they have tastes of it. And almost everybody who's a seeker has inklings of something from the past. Oh, I had this, and I had this, and I had that. And certainly in my life, whatever I had long ago, and it might have been just a little tingle or a little expansion or a little divinity, ended up being the experience when it became understood and became substantial enough to be there. Then it became permanent. I could call it up at will. And that's the other thing. Most people will say let's say they've got the silence, they got some stillness, they understand it. I am that. There's some kind of feeling there. But it's not there all the time. I say, well, if I'm eating a pizza, well, I'm enjoying the pizza. And I understand if I put my attention on it. Yeah, there's this wholeness there. There's this stillness there. It's like you're walking down the street. You know where you are. Let's say you're in Fairfield, which is where I am. I know I'm in Fairfield all the time. I don't have to put my attention there. But if I put my attention there, then I can start describing the details of Fairfield. Otherwise, my attention, I'm not saying it's quite like that, but it's sort of like that, is that I've had it so long that I can look over there and I know it, or look over there, I can have it. But that comes after you really become habituated to the sense of the self. But at first, it could just sort of seem to go away. If you can find it, you got it.
So early on, like about a week after my awakening, right? For the week anyway, after the awakening, I had this sense of unbounded peace, right? I was like, this feels so joyful. I feel so free. All my fears have disappeared. And then I woke up one morning and it was gone, Harry. It was like the contractedness had come back and I went, oh no. And I went out for a walk and I was like trying to find it on my walk, and it came back a little bit in the evening time. And then the next day it disappeared for a little bit. And for about 2 or 3 days, and I almost got the sense that it was doing that on purpose to give me some sort of contrast, to say, okay, here it is, let's take it away. And now let's bring it back. And now do you feel the expandedness? And let's take it away for an hour or two. I know that happened to you, right? at a certain stage, you lost it for a little bit, and then you knew that's how you had already had it. Will you describe a little bit of that?
This was a long time ago, and I was on some kind of retreat in Europe and meditating long hours and all that kind of stuff. And we were in silence and whatever. And I was walking in the mountains of Switzerland, and I think it was dark. It was, and I was walking along this path a little by myself, and suddenly, I don't know what happened to me, but suddenly I felt horrible, terrible. I've never felt like that in my entire life. I don't even know why or what happened. And I said, whoa, this is bad. What's this? And I sure hope it goes away. And I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes later, whatever I had prior to that terrible feeling started coming back. And I said, whoa. And then that bad feeling, that bad sense, like nobody is home. I was in a big void of nothingness, worse than death. And I said, and then maybe 3, 4, 5 minutes, it had faded. And then I started thinking, like my mind kicked in and said, what was that?
Mm-hmm.
But even more important is, what do I have now that I didn't have during? And I said, I lost my self-awareness for a moment. I lost the self, the expansion, the simplicity, the bliss, all this feeling of wholeness, connectedness, all of it went away just for a few minutes. And I say, whoa, thank you, God. If that's what I had prior to this meeting, and now I got it again, I must always have had it. And yes, that's the dawn that came. It was like, a deep insight. Nature wanted to give me a little kick to remind me that you have this sense of the self, and it's always there, and it always has been. It all came back. It was like, I knew obviously that I've had it my whole life, or a long time at least, and it was kind of an awakening. It's sort of the opposite of an awakening for a moment that made it extremely real to me, right? So that was my little episode of non-awakening.
Okay, and just listening into that, Harry, that sounds like that nothingness, right? That beyond consciousness, the what some people refer to as Brahman, right? And I know when people shift into that, they lose their enlightenment or their sense of unity consciousness. Could that be what that was? Was it
No,
like a no, it wasn't that. Okay.
absolutely
Okay.
not. I was totally.
Okay.
I know what you're getting at, and there's a stage beyond this unity consciousness, but unity doesn't go away. Even the self,
Mm,
nothing goes away, because it's a state of everythingness, not nothingness. Now, I
yeah.
would relate to, let's say somebody meditated for a long time and they get into this state without the knowledge. They just have this experience of unity, but they don't know what it is. It seems to be empty. Nothing seems to make sense. And these kind of people who get into that state need a teacher. They need somebody to tell them, this
Yeah.
isn't a nothing state. This is an everything state. It's a fullness state. And most people, and I've met people like that, they'll say, if they come to a group, I already have this unity thing you're talking about, and it doesn't mean anything to me. I've lost interest in life because there's nothing there, no responsibility.
Mm,
That kind of experience is a partial experience of unity, partial,
yeah.
10%. They haven't got it yet. They
Yeah.
don't, their mind, their body, their environment, everything has been rejected, not taken in. Like when you describe unity, you basically talked about the environment becomes intimate to you, it gets close to you, you don't
Yeah.
see any separation. That's gone. That's not
Yeah.
unity. Let's call that the no self experience.
Yeah.
Zero self. My experience has always been the all self. I had the no self experience, and I don't recommend it.
No, I say the same. I get a lot of people, and it's like they hear about it and they go, "Oh, I really want that." And I say, listen, enjoy whatever state you're having at the moment, because for 2 years it felt like I fell down a well, Harry. It was like
Really? Hmm.
I felt like I had fallen down a well. I felt like my world was up here. I could see this little glimmer of light, and someone would come along and talk to me, and I would have to come up out of the well and interact with them. It took a little bit of effort, and then I would fall back down into that nothingness. And for me, it was like the whole world, right? It still looked the same as what everybody else was seeing, right? But I knew that if I could peel back the corners, there was nothing behind it, the screen. It was like everything was just a projection on the screen of Brahman. It didn't stay like that for me. Eventually, the fullness came back in, the love, the interconnectedness, and it's a really nice state now.
The most
So,
people who wake up get a sense of relief or a sense of, wait a minute, I think I've always had something like this, or they get a little more, they get knowledgeable, and that knowledge eliminates some of the dark corners in life and some of the stresses in life. At least I had one person describe it. They went into this unified state of consciousness, and they used to be this small. So all their stresses, whenever they came into this little bubble, really overshadowed it. But now their consciousness is, at least on the feeling level, huge. So this stress and this stress doesn't shrink the self, doesn't make it small, doesn't make it go away. So like that. Now, the thing about, I'm a little bit of an interesting person to talk about higher states of consciousness because I've had them so long. I have to try to remember what people, if you talk about, there's 4 or 5 different layers. And it's not one state, it's a continuous state. Even this unity state we're talking about, it's permanent, it's wonderful. It can be blissful, it can be knowledgeable, it can be any number of different things. But because there's growth still, it can also
yeah.
change, and it can give you some what's going on now, even though it's permanent. It's just permanent in the sense it's not going back anymore, it's just going forward. So for me,
So you can connect back to that, right, at any stage, Harry.
oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's always there. It's always contained within that experience, right? You can choose to go back. You can choose to go back to the self.
I can choose to go anywhere in terms of
Yeah,
knowledge, in terms of understanding
yeah.
all states, including ignorance. Well, it's just kind of funny, but you don't really understand ignorance until you're not ignorant. Then you can look at it and talk about it realistically. In ignorance, you're overshadowed by the ignorance, so you really
Well, you
don't know.
don't know you're ignorant. That's the
You don't
problem with
even know you're
ignorance, right?
ignorant. That's what ignorance is. You don't even know you're ignorant. That's a good point. I like that.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
you know, whenever somebody says, I'm going to read a poem on, I cringe. And why is that? Because most poems aren't, they're what? They're a little bit embarrassing. But before I get into this, I want to talk about the divine levels of consciousness and these states
Yeah.
beyond beyond unity consciousness, if you want to go there in this
I'd
meeting.
love to hear it. I'd
Okay.
absolutely
I'm
love
going
to
to,
hear it. Yeah.
but because you're a captive audience, I'm going to read a poem to you, which was going to set the
Okay.
stage for some of that stuff. All right. You can always
Okay.
cut it out if you want to. Okay.
I won't cut it out.
No, I'm okay with that. Okay.
I won't.
So I went through a phase some years ago where I started writing poetry, maybe 10 years ago. It lasted a year. I wrote 500 poems. I couldn't write a poem if you threaten to shoot me now, but during that 1 year, they were just coming out
Yeah.
nonstop. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is one of those poems.
Okay.
I'm going to have to change my glasses. Okay. The Wonder of My Sight. That's the title I put on it. I saw perfection's radiant form, a circle burning central shine, rings of creation, spreading, forming differences to hold, a breath from speeding back unknown. I am this holding sound that speaks its wonder to my sight, declaring fullness as a point so small that eternity in flux will hide its nest inside. And all the gods and goddesses have found their space of play and stirring, pouring happiness so loud that stillness can't resist but shout and mix its knowledge to a soup. So grand that even I can find a causeway to creation's infinite arms, with the earth, body, soul, heaven, me, and God, all flexing knowledge, bliss, and joy. Can go as oneness, separate ways, forever joined, a geography of heaven's home. I alone and you alone, so close that every tiny thought, every tiny sense tingles at God's open door. You can see I wrote this a long time ago because I wrote it longhand. It's not in the computer at all. I used to write these experiences with a pen. And
Yeah. Harry, can I just say, while you were reading that, I was sat here thinking, how lucky am I to sit here with such interesting characters and hear their amazing stories and to bring these conversations to life, out to people, out to public for them to watch. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
so the thing about that particular poem is, it's like all poetry, it skirts around the central theme. It's always implying, implicating, pointing towards. And when we talk about higher states of consciousness, they get a little bit more and more difficult to describe, because they describe, or when you talk about them, you have to describe the full range, not a part of the range. Unity, I think of unity consciousness, it's a beautiful state of consciousness, but it's like what? It's like a container, and you filled it up, but you don't know what you filled it up with yet. It's not empty, because it's the container that it's eternal, it's infinite, it's large, everything can fit in it, but it hasn't fit in yet. Unity consciousness, I am stillness.
So Harry, what is the container, right? And let me just, because I really want to get into these states, right? Because I've had my experience of them, right? And my experience of unity consciousness was that somehow the container that housed my limited consciousness smashed. Okay, it exploded or it smashed, and my consciousness then merged with the universal consciousness. It spilled out beyond me into my surroundings, and my understanding from that moment on was that I was connected to everything, right? My surroundings, I could feel, I could sit on a bus and I could like connect to somebody's feelings. My vision, what I was seeing was coming back. So you talk about the container. What's that container holding? It's holding the whole world, all your experience.
Yes, everything, but you don't know it.
Okay.
Remember when
So
now you talk, we're human beings. That I'm simplifying these states so that they can be
yes,
understood in their simple state, in their beginning stage. I'm not trying to describe what's in the container yet, other than the
sure.
self, the knower, the experiencer, the feeling of fullness, the feeling of universal activity, the feeling of even the gods and goddesses, whatever
Yeah,
feeling
yeah,
level. That's all I'm
yeah.
talking about now. Okay.
So,
Now, you've had more than that, so you want to get into that. And I'm saying unity consciousness, theoretically,
yeah,
because everybody's going to be different. Some people
yeah,
have had a taste of the divine, or the taste of this, or and some of that will be in there. We're like a big churning food processor. It's all getting mixed up, right? Now, so let's call the container your first experience of pure consciousness. And you don't know the details of pure consciousness. You don't know the details of yourself yet. You just know that it's wonderful potential. It's a good thing. It's wonderful. Many people, I would say most people, stop at unity consciousness, and no problem.
yeah,
It's called
yeah,
enlightenment. Okay, no
yeah. I
problem.
would agree.
For me, it started filling up with stuff. And by that, I mean that everything that I saw or experienced or heard became part of that space within the self, became part of it. So I'd look at over there, or I'd look off over there, or I'd look over there. And I know that they were almost as if they were looking back at me, like I was looking at a mirror of the self wherever I was looking. We could call that super unity or supreme unity consciousness. When you begin to, another way of looking at it is, and this may not be, because unity consciousness has already accepted that whatever you're looking at in your immediate environment is somehow connected to you. It's unified. Inside, outside, there's a connectedness, but let's call it local connectedness.
Yes.
You're not seeing,
because you don't know what's outside. Exactly.
you don't know what's outside there yet. You don't know that
absolutely.
You know there's an outside, but you don't know what's there. So it hasn't filled up with it. Now, let's call that immediate perception in terms of the self, inside, outside. And the space is sort of part of the experience. It's no longer separating anything. It's now joining everything. So your senses are getting involved.
Yes. And I had the experience of that one day where I went to collect the kids from school, and I was stood there, and all of a sudden I was listening to people speaking, and I could sense that they existed within me, right? So I was them, and then I was also the space in which everything was happening. All the conversations were happening. I was containing all of it. I was that.
Yeah, that would be kind of a post-unity experience. Yes. No problem. It's wonderful.
Okay.
And guess what? That experience becomes permanent at some point.
Yeah.
It's always there. Just like when you first came and you were looking for this experience and you said, well, it went away. Where did it go? Well, post-unity experiences just expand. You could look at, I like the term you use, layers of consciousness. There's one way of looking at the whole evolutionary process. There's pure consciousness. It's lively enough to know itself. It's not the little self that knows the self. It's the big self that knows itself. And you begin to recognize that you are the big self. So here you are. You got this feeling that the self is there, the silence, the stillness, whatever you want to call it, this fullness is there. That's one level of consciousness. Now, when you've been in that state for a while, you meditate, come out in maybe you begin to see the vibratory quality of that knowingness that was just a knowingness. Maybe it becomes a sight. Now, that sight of knowingness, because it's knowing, it has forms. It's called this divine level of consciousness, the celestial level. It's also part of your consciousness. And how many people? Maybe 5% of people can see that level. And then they get lost in that level, and they turn into channels or seance people or whatever they do. But if you wake up and begin to see that, it doesn't overpower the self anymore. You just know it's one of the layers of the self.
Okay, so in unity, I opened up to being able to feel beings, right? I was one with everything, but now I could sense, oh, I can feel that there's an intelligence has just entered the room, or people actually had the experience of people who had passed on were actually trying to connect with me to pass messages on. So I guess what happens is that some people, they awaken into unity consciousness, and all of these sort of gifts open up. They start channeling, they start getting information. Is that what you were trying to describe there, Harry?
Yes, except they don't have to go into unity to do that. The problem is that they have it prior to unity, having those kind of the astral experiences. Now, I'm not talking about experiences. I'm talking about how the mechanics of creation or the processes of creation actually work. Okay, so there is an astral level, but it'll overshadow you just like any other experience in the relative does prior to waking up. If you happen to have that, power or perception. And I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is the divine level of consciousness. You got this knowledge level. You're in the self-awareness state. You're awake to it. You know it's there. I'm talking about experiencing the mechanics or the processes of your consciousness actually functioning. Astral level is one of them, but I'm not going there. I'm talking about what,
Yeah.
let's call it the divine level. It's more subtle
Okay.
than the astral. Let's call it the causal level if you want. Yes, it's full of the laws of nature. These laws of nature are personified. Maybe some people begin to see those. It's no longer going to overshadow you because you're in a unified state, which is permanent. Within that unified state, there's these subtle levels of consciousness, the causal level of consciousness, let's say, the laws of nature, how they function. Now, these laws of nature, fire, air, water, earth, and so forth, the material phenomenons, the material, even though they're happening within the self. They're making your body all the time. They're making your consciousness on the physical level. Now, when you go into unity consciousness, your immediate environment begins to be experienced as part of or as the self. These laws of nature also made the material world as well as they made your body and everything else. So you begin to understand and experience that your immediate environment is also somehow connected to the self or unified with what you know or the experiencer. That's the first stage of unity consciousness. Another stage of unity consciousness is that the boundaries of the room that you're sitting in, also something outside the town you live in, the city you live in, the country you live in, you begin to sense that you're not limited to the room you're sitting in. These aspects of the self that are the aspects of nature are making the whole world. You begin to sense, just like you did in the early days of unity, you sense it first, and then you almost begin, you don't see it the same way you see the room, but you see it nevertheless. You see it kind of on the wings of knowingness, knowledge. It's like the senses jump into the chariot, as it were, and go outside the room and say, oh, I'm also not only the immediate environment, but the distant, I'm that too. Wait a minute. Now the container is starting to get fuller.
It's getting bigger. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now it
Yeah.
doesn't stop there. There's another stage where the distant environment, the stars, the galaxies, everything, you begin to know, well, wait a minute. It's almost like your imagination becomes real. And it's not imagination. You begin to understand that everything is the self. You already knew that. Now you're beginning to see it, or not with your physical eyes, but with the eyes of consciousness. Let's say it like that.
Your inner sight. Yeah.
Yeah. So now the whole universe, you're not going to see the details. You're not going to see if there's bugs on Mars, you're not going to see them. Okay. But you're going to understand, you're going to see, you're going to hear, all your senses get involved in the cosmic environment. Everything is the self. The universe is the self. I am everything. You already knew that in unity. Now you know it more concretely. You know it more. You filled up the truck. Okay, it's got stuff in it now, and the stuff is all the self. You never went out of the self to have these experiences. The knower knows. There's nobody else in your world. Even your family, friends, they become aspects of the self. It's not that you don't love them. You love them more because they've taken a fuller value now, and they're reflecting back to you a fuller value. Are you
Okay.
a little bit?
I'm totally getting this, and it's making a lot of sense to me, right? Because, okay, so early on, going through the stages of awakening for me, right? There was something, an intelligence, consciousness, right? Trying to teach me, showing me visions. I would say, what's happening? What is this state? And I would see a screen open up, and it would be like something greater than me was now teaching me. Okay. And as I started to get through the different levels, right? It all started to fall away. It got quieter and quieter, right? To the stage or to the point where there's nothing there. There is nothing else but my own experience of myself, right? It's like I can't go out there, I can't communicate with anything outside of myself. And I always want to know what happened, Harry. What's happened to me?
Is that where you are now?
Yeah, there's nothing, I cannot find anything outside of my own experience, apart from when I hear. But if I try and go and connect to something, it's gone, right? It's not there. I just know my own experience. I close my eyes, my consciousness is, it's like the inside of a shell, like the mother of pearl. It's shiny and it feels nice and everything's full and I'm lacking nothing. But there's no intelligence. I can't have a conversation with anything outside of myself in consciousness.
Well,
Where did it go?
you're completely right, but you're missing one thing.
Tell me.
See, once you're in unity consciousness, even the first, you know that everything is the self. Okay. This is where
Yeah.
words fail, but let's
Yes.
try it anyway.
Okay.
Since in the early days, your immediate environment turns to the south, but you can see there's a bookcase over there. You can see there's a door, and all your conditioning informs you that's a door, that's a floor, that's that. The universe it's exactly like that. It's not empty. It's the same fullness that creates this room. Okay, there's a space in this room, but you need that wall to have this space. You need that bookcase to have this space. You got specificity to the space. It's defined by that specificity. You will at some point get to the point where the universe is the specificity of that emptiness you're feeling now. And guess what? This room is much bigger, better, fuller, and richer because it has details in it. Otherwise, it's an empty room.
Mm.
It's not pretty. It doesn't have a value other than it's protecting you from the environment. Okay. Now, in order to have that experience, though, you're going to have to jump over a few little intellectual, emotional, heart-wise, and physical hurdles. And those hurdles have to do with logic. It's not logical anymore. It's not that kind of experience. And here in Fairfield, it's called Brahman consciousness. It's not a nothing state, it's an everything state, but where you can get hung up that everything is the self. But it doesn't take the everything away. It brings everything to the value of the self in its particular form. Do you know what I'm saying? That's where the hang up is. It's you are it all, and you are the whole universe. You're never going to see the universe in details. It's too complicated. That's in the realm of the creator of the universe. And we'll get there in our final comments.
Okay.
You haven't found him or her yet because you're in this big, wonderful, empty space. We're going to fill up that space first. What are we going to fill it up with? The self. But the self can look like this, it can look like that. Just like the beginning days of unity, you knew your environment, was connected to you on a cosmic level. You also got to believe that, accept that, and know that, and have the experience of that. Any of that make any sense to you?
Yes. Okay. So let me just, I'll try and bring my experience into it. So I shifted into that Brahman state, right? I had that experience where I became the nothingness, right? And then from that nothingness, and it took a while. It didn't happen overnight. It took a year or two where there was a descending or a re-entering back into creation. And as I re-entered back into creation, I pulled in with it all of them finer aspects like pure divinity, all of these really nice states and sensations came back in, and I became very transmissive. Them qualities started kind of to emanate from me, right? And that's part of what I do now is I work with people and I sit and meditate with them and they can tap into them energies. But I still can't connect with anything. Just like I can't reach out and talk to God, or I can't.
Well, you're always going to talk to yourself, whether it's God.
I'm talking to myself. That's what it feels like.
But
And
that's what you are. You're talking to me. Do I look
yeah,
like nothing?
no,
That's right. I don't look like nothing. Harry
you
Alto
look like
is
Harry.
yourself.
Yeah.
Harry Alto is yourself. You just haven't made the
Yes.
jump from Harry Alto to a bigger value of yourself.
Mm.
You, you're convinced, and it's okay. You're in the unified state. You're in unity consciousness. Beautiful, wonderful. That's baby Brahman. By baby Brahman, I mean you're moving into that. Now, it's not logical. Excuse me. You sense that it's a fullness. It's
Mm.
nice.
Yeah.
What's missing is, what is it full of? It's full of the self. Your intellect tells you that. It's you. It's full of you. Why dismiss everything in its specific values as not being you? No point to it.
Mm.
There isn't. It's just that you don't see it yet. You see it in your immediate environment because you sense it, because you're
Yeah.
so used to using your sense of sight and your sense of hearing. You know that's the self you're hearing and seeing and
Oh,
touching.
oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Like
do
when
it
I'm having a
within you.
conversation with you, like you exist within me, right? I'm talking to myself
So why not the
through
universe?
nothing comes back.
Well, it doesn't
Only,
come
only.
back yet. Okay. Okay. This is I don't know how many people will be
Well,
interested.
Harry, it has though, right? Here's the thing. It has. It's shown up in like I've had Krishna show up. I've had lots of goddesses and gods, and I've been brought into that cyan blue, what I would call the mind of God, Krishna consciousness, and I've had those experiences. But now I just find it's like I've gone on this huge journey and I've come all the way back. And I'm back more human than I've ever been. I'm more in the body than ever.
Well, think of it. Here's another couple of ways of thinking about it. It's not only your mind that's expanded; it's your
Yeah,
physiology. Your whole body is the universe.
yeah, yeah,
Everything is the self. You've said that over and over again.
yeah,
Everything is the self. That means your body is the self too.
yeah,
So everything is connected to you, but your senses are still functioning, and they're flowing within the self. They move within the self. That's right. They just
yeah,
haven't moved far enough yet. Now,
yeah. Well, for instance, okay, go ahead. Sorry.
the most important thing here is, you said something very significant. Is that it's like you came full circle.
Mm,
You're back to where you used to be, but you're not back to where you used to be prior to the transition. You're back
yeah,
to the naturalness, the simplicity of the experience. Now, that naturalness and simplicity of the experience gets more natural, not less natural when you have the whole cosmos in your consciousness. And if you want to know how to meet God or goddess of the universe, if you believe that exists, and I've certainly see it and have seen it, and you have to be even more natural and simple. In other words, you can't fall on your face in ecstasy and say, well, I saw Krishna and Krishna is so wonderful. He's so bright. I just can't even see him. Just can fall on my face. Well, he's not going to be interested in you if you're on your face on the ground. He's only going to be interested in you if you're standing upright, you're calm, collected, and you have the understanding and the feeling that you're ready.
mhm.
Does that make any kind of sense to you?
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
I About 40 years ago, I used to get Krishna. He was 50 feet tall. He was in front of me all the time. He was so glorious that I glance up. I mostly see his feet because that's all I could take. I was too intense. I was interested in him. Was he interested in me? He was interested in enough in me to just kind of be there. But he wouldn't talk to me or communicate with me.
He didn't talk to me either. He just smiled.
Right. That's the first stage of meeting God. But that's not meeting God. Meeting God means that the same way that you got used to unity consciousness, it's natural, simple, no big deal. God is the same way. No big deal. When he's no big deal, but you're willing. Now, there's a kind of interesting thing that happens here. You go into this unity state that you're in, and you go through these steps, and you've had tastes of Brahman. It's obvious. You're kind of going up a ladder, and that ladder is the laws of nature, the devas of nature, whatever you see, and you begin to accept all the not only immediate environment as the self, but the distant environment as the self, the divine environment as the self, the cosmic environment as the self. None of it can go away. You ain't going to end it. You don't have that kind of power. It's going to be there. It's a reality. If you don't accept it, then you're not going to see it. You're not going to be it. Unity consciousness is this big, huge, wonderful experience of fullness, potential. Potential, keep that word. Potential.
Oh, yeah.
Potential for what? Well, potential for filling up the basket with more of the self, not particular values. Now, God is different from a particular value. God made the whole thing. When you know the universe and you've accepted all these layers of creation as the self, then you're not a squatter in God's house anymore. Now you're the owner of God's mansion, the universe. So the owner of the house wants to check out who's living in his house. He now comes closer to you.
Okay.
You don't do anything anymore, but you have to get there. You have to own the house. You're going to talk to you. He's way off somewhere. He's not interested in rentals. So my experience of unity with God was when even God, and for me, it wasn't just God, it was also the goddess. There's two of them.
Yeah,
They're separate.
I've had that.
They're separate entities. They're not, they don't look the same. They don't talk the same. They have different functions, even though they're gods, even though they're totally united. It didn't make this whole thing about super unity made no sense to me until God and Goddess were on the scene. None at all. Brain didn't get it. Just fried my brain. No, wasn't possible to understand. But when you put somebody who looks a little bit like you, God, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 head, 1 body, Goddess, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 body, 1 heart, 1 mind. If you can believe in that stuff, if it's part of the potential of your intuitive understanding, the potential of this unity that you have, unity means unity with everything. If you think unity is unity with nothing, well, you're wrong. It's unity with everything. Now, the problem is that everything doesn't lose its everythingness in the process of you becoming that. The self just gets it, just like you did the unity. Your intimate relationship with your immediate environment says, I am that, okay? But it's not, nothing changes. The room remains the room, the bookshelf, the picture, the wall, they all remain. Same with the universe, they all remain. It's just a bigger house, that's all it is. It's still the self. Only the self can have an intimate relationship with God and Goddess. And it's always going to be you. You're the center of your own universe. God's never going to be the center of your universe because you're the one that's self-existent, eternity, and infinity. God is something else. You're never going to know him or her totally. billion times beyond you.
Yes.
But they'll talk to you, or they'll communicate with you, or they'll be a presence in your life
Yeah.
consciously. Just like unity became a presence in your life overnight in a couple of years. You stabilized it. Now, is anybody else going to relate to these conversations we're having, or is it just you and me now?
Well, let's keep going. I'm really enjoying this, Harry. I mean, I want a better comprehension, right? I want to understand, and this is part of why I do this, right? I want to hear other people talking about this and giving me, like, it's like you're giving me your perspective on it, right? And it enriches my understanding of it as well. So I'm fascinated for anything else you can share, right? So you just mentioned that we are the center of our own universe, right? And that's very much how it feels to me, right? This is what I keep talking about. I go in, all I know is myself, right? And then when I open my eyes, everything is contained within me. And I've
You
had,
just say everything is contained in you, other
yeah,
than this void that you feel.
know that as well, right? That's it.
No, I mean, that would be the distant environment, God, and God, as you said, you don't get anything.
Well,
So
I don't get like a way of communicating with them, right? But I know that they all exist within what I am, and I am part of what they are. But it's like even the astral realms disappeared for me, right? So everything just disappeared. I used to have access to the astral realms. I used to have access to lots of different things, and then it just all just quietened down. But
even the
that's not to
self
say that.
disappears, right?
Say again?
The self also
Yeah.
disappears.
Um,
Because it's no longer the self that you used to know. This is a new state of
it's
consciousness.
different. Yes, yes,
Different.
absolutely. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
different. Go ahead. I'm sorry
yeah.
I interrupted your.
No, I was done. Well, okay. So I had the experience, right? I got to that plane of existence where it was like the mind of God, right? Krishna consciousness. It was blue. It was pure potential. It was love. It was like, oh my God, this is it, right? This is the place I want to be. And when I was there, I was it. I had merged with it. It was me. And then I also could perceive myself down in reality. And I was like, oh, there's an individual down there who thinks he's in self-realization, or and I kind of found it felt really funny that there was a something separate of myself in creation, thinking that it was anything, right? And then I also had, this didn't happen. There were different times, different stages. I also had an experience of her, the Divine Mother. And she wasn't the goddesses, though, right? All the goddesses were part of her, but she came in and she let me experience her through my physical form. So almost like every cell of my body was like able to experience what galaxies were like when they were being birthed, right? So they were explosions, right? Galaxies coming into form, worlds creating, and I was feeling them inside my cells, right? I had this really beautiful experience of her. She experienced herself through my limited form, and then she left. And then I was different, and then everything quietened down a lot.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
The well, yeah, it's beautiful, and you're completely content there.
totally content. Nothing is lacking whatsoever. Fullness, there's richness, love, always. Yeah, my heart is bursting always.
I must be greedy. I must be really greedy because I not only want or have what you have, I want something more. And it's kind of interesting. My experience of, say, God was okay. So I went into God's presence a long time ago, and God came into my presence long, and I could see him. And we could communicate, but not in the way that I'm talking to you. It's different.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, so is there any more? What am I missing? I always ask that. I told you I'm greedy.
Well, so am I, Harry.
And then what happened is God sort of communicated to me, well, what about Lakshmi, my whatever they call it, cohort or something. Okay, my nature, let's say. Oh, suddenly Mother Divine, the creator of the universe, the maintainer of the universe, that would be the mother value. She came. Yeah. So Krishna introduced me to her, and she said, let me really introduce you to Krishna, because you can't have Krishna without me, and Krishna can't have you without me. We're both the universe. We're personifications of the universe. The absolute flat unboundedness, the personification of that is Krishna or God, whatever form you want to put on it. Personifications of the relative, all the relative, the unbounded universe is Mother Divine. Mm. You need both. And guess where they placed me? They said, why don't you take a position in the middle? So there's God, God is me, I'm in the middle. And I could see God, and God is, they're talking to each other, communicating with it. Well, their communication creates the universe. Mm-hmm. Guess how they make the universe? Through me. However, it didn't blow my head.
You're the experiencer. You're the experiencer of the universe.
There's only one experiencer here, me, the individual, personal, cosmic being. Yeah. And so here I am, sitting as a cosmic being in the middle. Now, it didn't blow my head to supersize, because they use ants and bugs to do the same thing, or trees and other people and everything. But they use the aspects of creation, particularly those aspects of creation that know themselves, that can communicate with them, have the clarity to at least be in their presence. And so their communication flowed through me and destroyed, promoted, and created universal events. So I said, whoa, that's pretty cool. I like that. And all I have to do is be there. I do. But until I saw that, I was still nothing but potential, pure, unbounded potential. I've been in this state that we're talking about, this unity state, I believe, 60 years or longer. I swear I was in it as a baby, only I didn't have a mouth to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is the reality for everybody, but it's certainly my reality. And I don't normally talk about this to people.
Well, I'm very, very happy you're talking about it with me, Harry.
I'm not sure you should make this public, though.
I promise I won't.
It doesn't matter. In the TM organization, they don't talk.
They don't like to talk about it. They don't like to talk about it. I know.
No,
I know.
And I don't work for the movement or anything. I'm on my own. But,
me neither.
but I'm also close. I give these experiences. There's a dome here where everybody, and they read experiences. I give these experiences. I've given hundreds of them to them. And so the top people in the movement read these experiences to hundreds of people every 3 or 4 weeks. I haven't given this God and Goddess thing to them yet. I'm a little hesitant to do that. But, and I'm not saying you're going to go there. I can't predict the whole future, that's for sure. But this is what I've gone through, and that's where I am right now. Is this made me completely content? Sort of, but there's more clarity to be had. Mm. Same stuff, more clarity, that's all. And I could say that to you. Same stuff, more clarity, that's all. You can't go wrong there, can you?
No.
No, that's kind of where I'm at. And it's really nice talking to you, because you obviously relate to what I'm saying and understand.
I have a big smile. I have a big smile on my face.
Yeah, you got a big smile on your face. And it's going to be interesting to see what your experience does in the next month. Not right now, but in the next month or two. And I've always found with all the people that I talk to and the people who wake up during the talk, they're kind of somewhat mesmerized and don't know what they're experiencing. But then I meet them a month or two later and something happened. I'd like to see something. But look at this beautiful space, this full space that you live in. I hope I shot an arrow into it and it sparked. And then it started. We'll see. Who knows?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've no doubt. I've no doubt. Because like it's almost like we get to a certain peak, right? We look over and then we see there's more peaks, right?
Yeah, that's it.
I don't want it to end, right? I don't want to get to a point where I stop. I'm not. There's no more layers to unfold. I want to keep unfolding whatever I can.
Maybe we can conclude by this whole thing that I think many other movements or many organizations, they don't make that much out of individuality or personality. I make everything out of it because without that, you don't exist. And
you have a great personality, Harry.
You don't exist without personality. So even on a cosmic level, even on the level of Brahman consciousness or the highest levels there are, what's become the highest level is the personality and the individuality. And I will go so far as to say, if you can believe in God, and God is the only reason God and goddesses are interested in you because you're an individual. If you were the same as somebody else, well, they've already met that somebody else. They want to meet you. That makes complete and total sense to me. But despite my age, I still work for a living, so I got to go do some work. This is just fun.
Yeah. So I guess there's nowhere else to go from this, Harry.
Oh, there is. There's a lot more. One thing I've noted that for most people, they need to be told about 50 times before they get it the first time. Then when they get it, then they start saying, and everybody, you're an individual. You're here. If what I'm saying is correct, then you're hearing it in your own way. And you're going to ruminate on it. You can't help it. You're going to ruminate on it in relation to your experience and your clarity and your personality. And you're going to say, well, this is how I experience this. Is this what you're talking about? And I'll say, yeah, sure it is. Or, yeah, let's tweak it a wee bit or whatever. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Have you ever looked at my business efforts, Alto Design, altomarbledesign.com? Have you ever looked at that? Look at that website sometime.
Harry, I'd also like you to tell me a little bit about your work, right? And your website and the meetings that you do. Could you do a little bit of that before we wrap up?
I have 3 calls coming in. Why don't we have another meeting in a month?
Okay.
And we'll go into everything then.
Okay.
You'll have all kinds of questions, and I'm happy to talk about my meetings more and more. I vowed to myself that I'm not going to go into this. I'm going to talk about simple stuff, but you don't want to talk about simple stuff. That's the problem.
I don't. I don't.
You don't want
really
to talk
don't.
about self-awareness and people are growing into. You want to talk about the epitome of the stuff. Where is it going or might be going, and all the heavy-duty esoteria.
Yes. Okay. So I tell you what I'll do, right? I'll put your website down below in the description. I'll put some links to your books. If people want to find you, they can do that.
That's great.
And then we'll do that.
Schedule another meeting. And this is between you and me more than your audience so far.
We'll do one for the audience, right?
Let's do one for the audience, please.
Okay.
Not many people have your experience.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Harry, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. And thank you to all the viewers and listeners. And we'll get Harry back on for you guys next time.
Thank you for having me.
Harry.
It was great. Bye.
It was really great. Okay. Bye-bye, guys. Thanks so much.